Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources, the articles, the research, maybe your own notes, and we really dig in.
Yeah, we pull out the most important bits, the surprising facts, those aha moments.
So you don't have to wade through it all yourself. Think of it as your personal shortcut to getting up to speed.
And we're here to guide you, help you see what really matters, the connections, maybe the deeper insights hidden away in there.
Absolutely. And today we've got a really fascinating stack. We're doing a deep dive into excerpts from a specific collection of classic French fairy tales.
The kind you find online, right?
Yeah.
Like the version we looked at from Gutenberg.org.
Exactly that one. It's a rich mix. You've got tales linked to famous names like Charles Perrault, Mother Goose, but also important women writers like Madame d'Aulnoy, Madame de Murat.
Madame de Beaumont, too. Some stories you'll definitely recognize or think you do. Others, maybe not so much.
Right. So our mission today is to jump right in and, well, uncover the surprising, the insightful, and sometimes, let's be honest, the really quite bizarre stuff lurking in these versions.
We want to pull out those unexpected details.
Yeah.
Find the common threads, those memorable bits that paint a picture that's maybe a bit different, sometimes darker.
Consider this your shortcut to getting properly informed about this specific source material. Let's unpack it.
Agreed. And a good place to start, I think, is with the stories you think you know. Because the details in these particular source versions, often startlingly different, maybe stranger.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. How about Bluebeard? Most people know the basics. Creepy rich guy, forbidden room, wife who looks.
Right. But the source adds these details that make it feel much more, well, immediate, unsettling even.
Like what specifically?
Well, for instance, the speed of it all, the courtship. The text says they spent a whole week at his place. Non-stop parties, hunting, fishing, balls.
The whole week?
Yeah, and it explicitly says nobody went to bed.
Yeah.
The whole night was spent in merry games and gambles. Imagine that for 7 days straight.
Right.
And then deciding to get married.
That sounds intense. Less like falling in love, more like maybe sheer exhaustion.
Could be. And the youngest daughter, how she suddenly changes her mind. The source says after this week, she started thinking his beard was not as blue as it used to be, and that he was a very worthy man.
Is that real affection or just, Stockholm Syndrome via party? It definitely puts her choice in a weird light.
It complicates it for sure.
Yeah.
And the climax, that confrontation in the room, the language in the source is really visceral.
How so?
It says, then seizing her by the hair with one hand and raising his cutlass with the other, he was about to cut off her head. Just like that. Direct. No softening it.
Wow. Just lays it out there, the cutlass grabbing her hair.
Exactly. And it stopped only by a loud knocking at the gate. And then immediately, 2 horsemen were immediately seen to enter. Bang, bang. Violence stopped by sudden arrival.
That specificity, it makes the danger feel incredibly real. Sharp contrast.
It really does. Okay, moving from that very specific threat, let's look at Sleeping Beauty, another familiar one. But the source, again, has these surprisingly extensive details, maybe darker ones, too.
We know the 100-year sleep, obviously. But what else stands out in this version?
What's really fascinating is the scale of what the fairy does, the one putting everyone to sleep. It wasn't just the princess.
Oh.
The source says she touched everyone in the castle. Governesses, maids, servants, guards, pages, footmen, and get this, even the horses in the stable. And the big mastiffs in the courtyard.
Seriously? The animals, too?
Yeah. Only the king and queen were left awake, so it wasn't just the court sleeping.
It's the whole place, the entire living, breathing castle, frozen, guard dogs, horses, everything.
Exactly. A complete bubble in time. And the thorns and trees that grow up, the source makes it clear that's the fairies doing too.
So great a quantity of trees, brambles and thorns interlacing each other, just grew up instantly. Ah, so it's not just nature reclaiming it, it's magical containment.
Precisely. Which explains how the prince gets through a century later, and why the trees snap shut behind him, isolating him inside.
And his arrival. You said it was darker.
The description's quite chilling, yeah. A frightful silence reigned around. Death seemed everywhere present. Nothing was to be seen but the bodies of men and animals stretched out, apparently lifeless.
Apparently lifeless. That's not the gentle slumber we usually imagine. Sounds pretty grim.
Definitely grim. And after navigating all that, this silent, thorny, seemingly dead castle, guess what they do?
What?
They get married immediately after supper in the chapel. After 100 years of sleep, straight to the altar.
No time wasted. And what about the prince afterwards? He just found a sleeping princess in a magic castle.
Well, the source has this funny little detail.
Yeah.
He goes home to his dad, the king, and tells him he just slept in a woodcutter's hut who'd given him some black bread and cheese.
He lied about discovering a century-old enchanted castle and marrying the princess.
Yep, just a casual fib. Adds this weird touch of, like, everyday deception to the huge magical event.
Huh. Okay. But there's more to this version, right? Something darker you mentioned.
Yes. This is where it gets really interesting, especially if you only know the Disney version. The source includes a sequel part, and the prince's mother, she's not just mean, she's explicitly an ogress.
An ogress, like a literal people-eating ogress.
Literal man-eating ogress, yes. And she has very specific, very horrible plans for the prince's kids.
Oh, no.
The source actually quotes her talking to her head cook. "I will eat little Aurora for dinner tomorrow," and then adds this incredibly chilling, almost mundane detail.
What is it?
"And I will have her served up with sauce Robert."
Sauce Robert, served with sauce Robert. That's unbelievably specific and horrible.
It is, isn't it? It takes it from just monstrous evil to this level of macabre domestic planning. It's unforgettable. Does it make her seem more monstrous, or just disturbingly practical in her evil?
I don't know, maybe both. It grounds the horror in something every day, which is almost worse.
Wow. Okay, that really sticks with you.
It really does. Right, let's shift gears. Completely different vibe. Master Cat, or Puss in Boots. What stands out in this source's version?
Well, the cat's obviously smart, we know that, but the source seems to really emphasize the strategy behind his cleverness right from the start.
Absolutely. His first big play isn't just getting the boots, it's property acquisition. He tells the reapers, under threat, "Say this land belongs to my lord, the Marquis de Carabas."
And the ogre he tricks later, he wasn't just some local landowner.
No, the source notes the ogre owned all the lands the king had just driven through. It was a massive estate.
So Puss isn't just snagging a nice house for his master, he's basically executing a hostile takeover of a whole territory. By tricking an ogre? That's some serious feline ambition.
It definitely elevates his cunning, and the famous bit where he gets the ogre to transform
into a mouse. Right. The source is very clear. He tricks him into becoming a mouse so he can eat him. It's not just a clever trick to get rid of him, it's predation.
Direct. Eat or be eaten, cat style. And the fancy meal the king finds at the castle.
The source clarifies that. It wasn't actually for the king, it was for the ogre's friends who were apparently coming over. But they saw the king arriving and did not presume to enter.
So the ogre's monstrous buddies were too intimidated by actual royalty to crash the party. That's kind of funny.
Adds a little touch of social awkwardness to the ogre world. And unlike some versions, this one comes with a very clear moral tact on the end.
Right, I saw that note. Something about how young men are better off relying on industry combined with ingenuity than just inheriting stuff.
Exactly.
Huh.
And another bit suggesting that even a miller's son can win a princess if he has good looks and good manners and some aid from dress.
It's surprisingly practical advice, almost like a self-help maxim from the 17th century. Industry, ingenuity, looks, manners, nice clothes, the whole package.
Seems like it. It feels very tied to the social realities or maybe aspirations of the time.
Okay, Cinderella. Everyone knows Cinderella. What's different or specific here?
Well, the slipper fitting. It's not quite the final ta-da moment in this version.
No.
The source says the sisters were amazed when it fit, sure, but it was still greater when Cinderella took the other little slipper out of her pocket and put it on her other foot.
Ah, she had the pair. The other slipper. That clinches it. Undeniable proof. That's a great detail.
Makes it totally definitive. And right then the source says, at that moment the godmother arrived, zaps her clothes with the wand, and they become still more magnificent than all the others she had appeared in.
An even better dress at the very end, like a final magical upgrade. Wow. And the stepsisters, how do they take all this?
Their reaction is instant, total collapse. The source just says they threw themselves at her feet asking forgiveness.
No argument, just boom. Groveling.
Pretty much. Quick and complete.
Okay, one more of the really famous ones for this section. Little Thumbling. Was it breadcrumbs he used? I always picture breadcrumbs.
Nope. This source is specific. Little white pebbles. He drops pebbles along the road.
Pebbles. That actually makes way more sense. Birds wouldn't eat pebbles. Much smarter.
Definitely more practical. And when they get abandoned, the other kids are crying. But Thumbling? He's cool. He knows the way back because of the pebbles he dropped. He's the planner, resourceful from the start.
He's got his act together, unlike the parents. And speaking of them, the scene when they realize the kids are gone, the source makes that quite vivid.
It does. The mother directly blames the father. It was thou, Guillaume, who wouldst lose them. Truly did I say we should repent it. And she's terrified they've been eaten by wolves.
Oh, Guillaume. He gets the blame.
Yeah, and apparently she keeps repeating, we should repent it like 20 times until the woodcutter just loses his temper. It feels very real, that panic, the blame, the fear.
That parental argument under stress.
Ooh.
Yeah, that feels grounded. And the ogre part, is it darker than just the chase?
Oh, significantly darker. The ogre gets home, it's dark, and he makes a mistake. He thinks his own 7 daughters are the boys.
No.
And he kills them. The source is brutally direct. Quote, without any hesitation, the throats of his 7 daughters. Thumbling and his brothers then escape, while the ogre's snoring, running away, trembling all the way.
He kills his own children by mistake.
Wow. This version pulls no punches. That's incredibly grim, even for the ogre's innocent kids, a consequence of his own monstrous nature leading to this awful error.
Exactly. So yeah, even the stories you think you know best. The source collection reveals these really specific, often much darker or just more complex details.
It really makes you rethink your assumptions about them, doesn't it?
Yes.
Takes off the sugarcoating.
Definitely complicates the simple once upon a time. Which leads us nicely, I think, into looking at some of the bigger themes that run through the whole collection, including the lesser-known tales in the source.
Okay, let's dive deeper. Themes. One that's obviously huge is fairies. This source presents a massive, varied cast of them. Right. Huge, yes, and numerous. They seem to have their own society, almost. The source mentions a fairy grave as an elder, suggests councils, hierarchy maybe, and their powers, incredibly diverse across the stories.
Like, they can grant specific things. Wit, intelligence. That's in Riquet with the Tuft.
Right. Or an Anguillette, the fairy gives beauty and wit. And wealth, that same fairy, Anguillette, grants inexhaustible treasures. Others control nature, like Tigerline, the rose tree fairy.
And transformation, that seems like a standard power.
Oh yeah, ubiquitous. Turning people into animals, monsters, objects, you name it. Some grant invisibility, like the one helping the Beast Prince. Others can see the future, predict fates, like Formidable or Tigerline.
But they're not all nice and helpful. Their personalities seem all over the place.
Totally. You get the protective, kind ones, bonbon, luminous, but then you get fairies explicitly called cruel, jealous, vengeful. Fairy Formidable is described as proud, wanting esteem, not love. Fairy Marmotte.
The one who turns the princess into a whale?
That's her. Cruel, lives with adders. Very sinister. Then there's Fairy Cornu in the Prince Cocorico story, jealous, steals princes, uses a horn for light. Just a weird, specific image.
And Fairy Candid in Prince Sherry? She punishes bad behavior with transformation, right? Turns him into a monster.
Exactly. They're not generic magic users. They have distinct personalities, methods, sometimes pretty unsettling ones.
And the source includes these odd little mythological bits about them, like gaining power by turning into serpents.
Yeah, that detail about turning into serpents 4 times to gain power, it feels like a hint of some deeper, maybe older folklore layered underneath.
But for all their power, there's a limit, right? Something they can't do.
Yes, and this comes up repeatedly in the source. It's a striking limitation. Fairies cannot control love. They can't make someone fall in love or guarantee constancy, fidelity.
That's huge. Even with all that magic, they can't touch the human heart's core choices. It really puts the focus back on the human character's struggles, doesn't it?
It draws a very clear line. External magic versus internal will, or maybe destiny. Which brings us right to transformations. You mentioned they're everywhere. What does the source suggest about why they happen?
Well, often it seems like punishment. Prince Sherry becomes a monster because he was behaving badly. Prince Cocorico gets turned into a cock by the jealous fairy Cornu. Shara turns unwanted suitors into trees. It feels like magical justice.
A kind of justice, yeah. Or sometimes it's tied to fate, a curse, a prediction. Like Princess Camion's transformations into a whale and crayfish were apparently foretold, but it's not always negative, is it?
No, right. Sometimes it's protective, like Sleeping Beauty's court being put to sleep protects them from time, maybe from intruders. Or Citronette and Princess Camion turning into crayfish helps them physically escape danger.
So transformation can be punishment, fate, protection. It serves lots of functions. And sometimes it seems to reflect character, like Prince Sherry's monster form mirroring his inner flaws.
And crucially, they're often not permanent. They can be broken, right? But it takes something specific.
Usually, yes. True love breaks the spell in Beauty and the Beast. Prince Zirphil has to perform certain actions. It links the physical change back to virtue or love, or fulfilling some task. Character matters.
Which connects directly to that other massive theme, love, fate, and free will. Seems like they're all tangled together.
Definitely. Love is the engine in so many of these tales. It drives characters through unbelievable trials, makes them choose difficult paths, endures so much.
But it's rarely easy street. It's always getting challenged by fate, by fairies meddling, by social status issues, by personal flaws. Jealousy is a big one, too.
Fate looms large. Sometimes it feels unavoidable. Princess Emus's life is mapped out by misfortune. Prince Fatal is literally named for his bad luck. Princess Lionette seems almost resigned to her destiny. Characters often wrestle with how much choice they actually have.
Like Prince Fatal choosing duty over love, or Lionette deciding whether to just accept being a lioness or fight it.
Exactly. How much agency do you have in a world where fairies or prophecies seem to dictate so much? And the tales often play with appearance versus reality. Love conquering looks is a recurring thing.
Beauty and the Beast, obviously. But also Riquet with the Tuft ugly, but his wit wins love. Prince Desire, Prince Zirful.
It reinforces that idea.
Hmm.
True beauty isn't skin deep. It's virtue, character, wit. And constancy, loyalty, and love is held up as this incredibly high ideal, though it's often hard to achieve.
Yes, you see Duty's loyalty, Fatal sense of duty, Zirfil's devotion, but then you also see fickleness. Prince Adamir, Cococo's early flirting. And didn't we say fairies can't grant constancy?
Right. That makes it purely a human achievement or failure, which is probably why jealousy is such a destructive force in these stories.
Yeah.
It attacks that very thing, loyalty, constancy,
Mm.
whether it's sisters, rivals, or even jealous fairies.
It's a constant threat they have to navigate. And love sometimes has unexpected side effects. Didn't the source say it taught someone to row?
Yeah. Parsenet learns to row because of love, something he couldn't do before. It's one of those small, specific details again. Grand passion enabling a practical skill.
Links the epic to the everyday. And you mentioned the source describes love itself in pretty strong terms.
It does. Anguillette warns Placine that love is a fatal passion that even fairies can't save you from. It's not just sweet romance. It's powerful, consuming, almost dangerous, like a force of nature or destiny itself.
Definitely puts a different spin on the happily ever after aspect. Okay, speaking of those small details, this collection seems full of them. Little odd things that stick in your mind.
Absolutely. Beyond the big plots, it's these quirky, sometimes bizarre details from the source that really give the collection its unique flavor.
Like that king Desire's father, reacting to the curse about his son having a long nose. He just laughs.
Yeah, Lassen says something like, well, unless he's blind or has no arms, you can always see it or feel it. Such a pragmatic, almost dismissive reaction to magic.
It's wonderfully dry. Or back to the Ogres Queen. That detail about wanting Aurora served with sauce Robert. It's so specific and culinary, it's horrific, but also weirdly memorable.
It's the kind of detail that makes her uniquely monstrous, maybe. And the magical objects aren't always standard things like wands.
Right. What were some examples? Lionette's protective pearl necklace. Princess Imus had a fatal lamp, but also a protective flower plume.
Lily of the Valley plume, yeah. There's a little boat that turns into a water palace. Zirful's ring that shows visions. Prince Kakariko had a whole gallery of political models.
And the most bizarre one has to be Princess Camion fitting inside a toothpick case when she's transformed.
The toothpick case. Definitely one of the strangest magical containers you'll encounter. It's these details, sprinkled throughout, that give the collection this distinct, quirky feel. High drama mixed with weird specificity.
Okay, so we've looked really closely at specific stories, unpacked big themes like fairies, transformation, love and fate, and highlighted some truly weird details. Let's pull back a bit. Who actually wrote this stuff? What was the context?
Well, as we mentioned, the source notes attribute these tales to major French writers from the 17th and 18th centuries. This is the era of Louis XIV's court, the rise of literary salons.
So people like Perrault, Madame d'Aulnoy, Madame de Beaumont, these were known authors at the time.
Exactly. It's not anonymous folklore being written down. It's literary creation drawing on folk traditions by specific authors with their own styles and audiences. It's a collection from different hands reflecting that specific cultural moment.
And the notes mention some stories are adaptations.
Yes, that's explicit. Madame de Beaumont's Beauty and the Beast is described as being cut down from a much longer original by Madame de Villeneuve, turning it into a pretty little nursery tale.
Ah, so that note itself shows how stories changed. Simplified, maybe, for kids. Losing some complexity, perhaps some of the strangeness.
It highlights that process of adaptation, how tales evolve. And the source notes also give us little windows into the historical context. References to Louis XIV, footnotes explaining terms like Hungarian water.
Which was linked to a queen of Hungary, right? Or mentions of Cardinal Mazarin, the Italian theater. connects it all to the court culture, Parisian society.
Exactly. And the editor included linguistic notes, too, explaining terms like sauce robert or queue de renard or the significance of names like Camion or Melusine. Shows an awareness that the language itself carries cultural history.
And the notes sometimes comment on the purpose of the stories.
Yes, Prince Fatal and Prince Fortune is explicitly called a moral fairy tale, meant to teach the value of adversity. But the note adds, maybe a bit wryly, that this is a lesson difficult to impress on a young mind.
So not just entertainment, some had clear teaching aims, and the editor wasn't afraid to comment on whether they worked. It's a fascinating mix: magic, morals, history, all blended together.
It really paints a picture of how these tales functioned back then.
Okay, so let's recap. We've taken the specific source material, these excerpts, from a collection of classic French fairy tales, and we've really dug into it.
Pulled out surprising details from stories you thought you knew.
Explored the diverse, often strange world of the fairies. Looked at why transformations happen.
Unpacked that complex tangle of love, fate, and free will.
And grounded it a bit in the time and place they came from, 17th and 18th century France.
And I think what we've seen is that these stories in these versions are way richer, more detailed, and often significantly darker or just weirder than the versions many of us know today.
Yeah. And diving into these specific texts gives you a much deeper feel for where fairy tales come from, how they changed. They weren't just simple kids' stories back then. They were complex narratives dealing with big themes reflecting the society that produced them.
The recurring patterns, the character types, they touch on things that still resonate, right? Destiny, love, virtue, appearance. But uncovering those bizarre specifics, the ogress's sauce preference, the toothpick case, that gives you those aha moments, expands your view beyond the surface.
It shows they're sophisticated, sometimes pretty unsettling stories grappling with what it means to be human, just through this lens of magic and fate.
So where does that leave us? We've gone from week-long parties and raised cutlasses to sleeping courts, ogresses planning menus, clever cats acquiring land, kids dropping pebbles, jealous fairies, and yes, princesses in toothpick cases.
We've extracted these specific insights, hopefully revealing the unexpected depth, strangeness, and historical roots of these classic tales from this source.
So thinking about this mix, the light parts, the really dark bits, the morals, the just plain weird stuff. What does the enduring popularity of these stories, even in their often softened modern forms, tell us about folklore's power?
And maybe more pointedly, what uncomfortable or perhaps useful lessons might these original, less filtered versions still hold for us today?
It certainly gives you something different to think about next time you hear Bluebeard or Sleeping Beauty.
Absolutely.
And that's the deep dive.